What? Oh, I didn't see the countdown. That's not. All right, welcome to our morning Bible class. If you're joining us live on YouTube, we're glad you took the time to be with us this morning. If you're watching this in the future, we're glad you took the time to watch it. If you want to interact, I have our comments, social media stuff up. So if you want to drop comments in or questions, concerns, or anything else, we'd love to interact with you. So we're in the book of Mark, in the Gospel of Mark. If you want to pop open your Bible and go to Mark chapter 9, I'm going to tie in chapter 8. We're going to kind of start there because I want to try to keep this context of what Mark is doing in the gospel together. A lot of times we fragment. We see the different stories, and they do stand on their own, but there's a larger picture coming in what Mark is going to reveal. Before we continue on, let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. Our most glorious and wonderful Father, we're truly humbled as we begin this moment in our lives to study your word. We hope, Father, that we'd be focused upon the meaning that you want us to have an understanding of, and that we'd be able to take it and make it a real part of our spiritual life, and that shapes us in a way that we can serve you better in your kingdom. We pray that you would help us, Father, to always be on guard against those things that cause us to stumble. And we ask you, Father, to please help us serve others more than we serve ourselves. And we ask this in Christ's name, amen. So as we come into Mark, one of the things that, like I said, the Gospels are so beautiful, and you can take those different stories, the feeding, the walking on the water, and all these things, but there's something bigger kind of being shown and revealed, and it's really the thing that Jesus was trying to do with his own disciples, and that is to, at this point in the Gospel, reveal to them who he really is in a way that they truly understand it. And so this linking, going all the way back to the feeding of the 4,000, and this providing abundance. Now, they had seen him walk on water. They've seen him calm the storm. They've seen him, do all these wonderful things. And in one moment, they're like, wow, And then the next moment, they're fearful in a boat, and they don't know why he's sleeping. It's back and forth, is this idea. But who do you think he is? And that's my question for people today even, is who do you really think Jesus is? It's kind of startling. Everybody goes, well, I know who he is. He's the Son of God, Okay, well, but do you know? I mean, what about him is he? And so people don't have a true vision. And that's what I loved about this, because as the story goes through, then he goes to the Pharisees and how the Pharisees demand a sign. And so they have this hostile blindness, because honestly, from here to the Transfiguration, I think is about the spiritual clearness of who he really is and seeing the truth. And that's why I want us to not, us to link ourselves to this lesson, because a lot of times we're faced with a new understanding, a new application of what God's word is telling me. And I know I've done it. There's been times in my life where there's passages, I read it, and then somebody presents another aspect to it, and I get spiritually blind. I go, oh, that's not what my grandpapa taught. So I think it's just, we have to be careful about ourselves. So the Pharisees, we had the feeding of the 5,000, we have the demand for a sign, then they get in the boat, and then Jesus says what? He warns them against the yeast, the leaven of the Pharisees, and Herod, which I always thought was interesting. Throw Herod in there at this time. And what do? They look among themselves and they go, oh, it's because we didn't bring bread. What? Look how big they miss that. He just had that encounter with a Pharisee, and then they're in the boat, and they think he's talking about bread. They didn't bring enough food for the trip. So I think this is where Jesus, as they come to Bethesda, is going to use that healing of the blind man, that he uses that to help them to start to see, you have some vision, but it's not clear. And that's why, this healing, when did Jesus ever have to heal multiple times, multiple efforts to get somebody healed? The leper, I got 50% of your leprosy. Okay, come here. Never. And so this is the lesson, because the first time he can see, but he doesn't have clarity or understanding. And then the second time, then all of a sudden he can see. And so it's a progression of trying to get them to see this. Now, there's something also significant. There's the location. They're in that region of Basha, which is basically an area of very high ritualistic, paganistic, historical background. They're in a pagan world out there. And all this is coming about and trying to show as well who he really is. And so they're in this foreign land. His disciples are not able to fully comprehend who he is. And then where does he take them? He takes them up to Caesarea Philippi. And geographically, if you are oblivious to what's the geographical, historical importance of those areas, you just miss it, don't you? I mean, what's important? So he took them up to, Caesarea Philippi. He could have done anything. He could have talked to Peter at any point and his disciples and looked at him and said, "Who do they say I am?" But he takes them to a very specific location that is so significant to the pagan world. And even in that question, it's two-phased, isn't it? So you had two phases to vision. You first see Jesus, you see what he's doing, but you don't have the clarity of full understanding. That's the healing of the blind man. Then he brings him up to Caesarea Philippi, and he goes through the same thing by starting out by saying, "Who do they say I am?" And they fire off the prophet, Elijah, and all that. And then what does he do? "Who do you say that I am?" And even with Peter's confession, it's kind of revealed that you didn't get that from yourself. Where'd it come from? It had to come from God. It came from God is where the clarity of who I am. So this is where this confession, but it's still, because remember, then he turns around and what does he do? The Lord then reveals to them the first time that I must suffer. And what does Peter do? "Oh, no, you're not." He gets, it's like, wait a minute. Why would you, if you just confessed it, which tells you that even in a confession, do you still truly understand who Jesus is? And that's today. A lot of people, in their profession and, coming to Christ, is their vision truly focused? And that's okay. There's a lot about, God, the Son of God, and some things that maybe we don't understand. And that's where sometimes, we give people a little more grace because they don't know. They haven't been able to see it. And I look at the way Jesus interacted with his disciples, how long he spent with them, and yet he had to put up with the fact that even they, living with him day in and day out, couldn't really understand who he is. So we see this resisting. This is where it comes to the point, comes to the head of this idea. Okay, I can get him to understand. Peter, my Father revealed to him who I am, but what about the mission? What are they going to understand that this isn't going to come in glorious manner? There's not going to be some formal inauguration, banquet, as I come into this. And that's us. We want glory without suffering, don't we? We do. I mean, come on. I mean, we do. We want the good. We don't want the bad. We don't want to have to go through something horrible to get to the good. And that's the flesh. That's just the way we are. We're built that way. And to see the prophecies and all of this come together and then to hear themselves even say it out loud, "Oh, you're the Son of God." Well, they're still not getting it. They're still resisting, aren't they? And so this is kind of the mapping of this purpose is why the Transfiguration was important. And you notice it was just to the three of them. So it's something as well that we see. So to me, as we're going to get to it, but I wanted to kind of give the synopsis, I guess you'd say, of the total idea that's flowing here, is that this glory being revealed is way beyond what their understanding is. And some of it was so overwhelming that it's going to be a while, before they finally possibly can grasp the totality of what's going on. And the appearance, of course, of Moses and Elijah, and this overshadowing of the clouds, everything that's going on there. But the main thing is the pointing to who? Pointing to Jesus. And that's what we see. So when you look at the location, like I said earlier, it's very important to understand, Jesus just wasn't just randomly traveling around the area. He was looking, and he understood the significance to the spiritual paganistic world as well. And he's not the Son of God to just the Hebrews. He's to all of them. And there is a spiritual war. I mean, that's the part that I think is kind of frightening, is that even today we're so prim and proper and, yes or no, sir. We're so sterile. We have so sterilized the spiritual dimension that we forget that it exists. And that's what they were struggling with, was the idea of the spiritual realm in which they live in and around, and it has an impact on our lives as well. For the longest time, the traditional site of this, the Transfiguration, was Mount Tabor, which is it's further south, Jezreel area, but a lot are starting to show, and I think the text as well has a strong link to where it's really Mount Hermon. And it does tie into the mission and the purpose of what the Transfiguration was going to reveal in the longer time. So, but again, I mean, it's not named. So I can't sit there and tell you absolute, because it's not. We're just looking at the context. They're in Caesarea Philippi. They're in that area during the confession. And then he takes them on a high mountain. They could have traveled south, but I think when you take, again, the idea that Jesus is proclaiming his kingship and his power, not just to the physical world, but in a sense symbolically as well to the spiritual world. He's declaring it and showing it. And so the power there. So I will just kind of briefly go through again, because we already started talking about Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi was renamed, right? I mean, it had a different name that most people would recognize. It's like, I know some people here. What's the original name of Tier C? The city up north? Huh? Hot Springs, right? Well, that just sounds weird, doesn't it? But then you talk to other people and they go, Tier C? What is that named for? You would not going to believe what it's named for, right? What's it named for? A game show. So they mean something different. And it, for the longest time, it's kind of embarrassing. I didn't know they had hot springs, hot water there. I didn't know it. They have hot springs flowing right into the river there. Because it's Tier C. See how it masks? But if I always knew it was called hot springs, guess what I'd link it to? Hot springs. I think this is what we see in Caesarea Philippi. When we look at Caesarea Philippi, we forget what the original name was. Banias and Panias is what the Gentiles would have known. And what are those? Well, Pan, the god of Pan, the god of, he was of wild places, shepherds, flocks, mountains, caves, fertility and sudden fear, the underworld. And you look at Basha, just that area there goes all the way Baal. You hear that Basha, Baal. Every time you hear that, you got possibly those words have a link to Baal. And so that's another reason this is kind of overshadowed by just the name Caesarea Philippi. But if you knew it by Banias or Panias, it was a spooky place. I grew up, and I know like Darren and Terrell and all the Haynes and people who have raised around here, the witch's grave. Remember that? Down in Old Messia. And it was a spooky place. I mean, you went there if you wanted to get scared. And if you went there, they had it all gated off because so many kids in high school would go out there to Old Messia to this grave. And apparently if you went there at midnight, certain conditions, you could see the cross turn on her grave or something. And just driving there, I remember one time we drove and we got to the end of the road and like, I ain't going in. You go. No, that's cool. We left. And of course, the police were so aware of it that they were always having to patrol it because of knuckleheads like us. But it was a frightening place. And I was a Christian. Monica Swamps. Anybody know about that? It's another location down on Mesilla Dam. La Riona. She roams up and down the river, And so we would scare our dates, our girlfriends would go down there and go, oh yeah, we're in Monica Swamps, And it's like, ooh, and you get good. But it had that stigmatism, right? It had that idea linked to it where it was frightening. It had that, and that's what this region is. Peneus is this area. It's not a place you'd want to go travel for a vacation. It had that type of reverence and fear to the Gentiles because of that spiritual connection. If you look at the book of Enoch, it's not a Bible book, and it's the Second Temple period, and it's got a lot of historical things, but, there's some stories in there about that's where, the fallen angels came down on Mount Hermon. And it's that type of an area that people recognize as this underworld, the cave that was there, as this connection to the evil and underworld. And when you look at the photographs of that area, this one I have up there, that cave was the gates to Hades. What did Jesus say whenever Peter confessed? He said, you are the Son of God. And he said, and upon that rock, the gates of hell will not prevail. Now, I have no idea. Nobody can link that he was sitting outside this and had his disciples sitting there. So don't go there. But the location, okay? You see these little niches they have set up. There were so many paganistic little gods that they would worship here. It would be like going to the Vatican and sitting outside the city of Vatican and giving your sermon there. That's what it was. So that's what I mean when I say, Caesarea Philippi, and then he has all this, the confession and the transfiguration and all that. Back up. You gotta go all the way back to the feeding of the 4,000, and then the encounter with the Pharisees, and then him telling them, beware of it. And the disciples not having that vision, comes over to Bethesda, and all of a sudden he heals the man with 2 stages in order to show that you have sight. The man had a vision, but not an understanding of what he was seeing. And then takes him up to Caesarea Philippi, right? And then he asked him, what is your vision of me? What is the people's vision or understanding of me? Oh, they say this, they say that, they say this. What are you? And then it's revealed by God, and then we have the transfiguration. Just kind of maps. I love maps. Looking at the different areas where it's at. But this is Mount Hermon. It is also interesting, even to this day, it is the farthest point in Israel. It is shared by Syria, Israel. Oh, I just brain locked the other one. But it's literally like a point, and there's an outpost sitting on it to this day. It is considered that kind of an important place. They have snow. They ski up there. It's a limit. It's kind of like Cloudcroft here in New Mexico. You might get some snow and be able to ski, but so it is a very prominent location going all the way back, thousands of years even before Jesus. So I think it's very strong that we can see this declaration and then the transfiguration. And again, even though it says take them up on the mountain, if you look at the south side of Mount Hermon, there's a lot of places. It doesn't mean they on top directly or whatever, but I still think the significance of that. So let's go ahead. We'll jump into the verses and we'll come on. Let's start in verse 9, chapter 9, verse 2. And after 6 days, took Peter with him, and James and John led them up high on the mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intense white, as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah and Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. So on this mountain revelation, we see mountains are important, right? I mean, they're very significant. He revealed himself on Mount what? Sinai. This radiant glory, this is also described multiple places in Revelation. This type of transfiguration, which is a transforming into something else. The Greek is basically saying he was not the way he was as the man Jesus. Whatever it was, it took him into that appearance, which I think was his real appearance spiritually. And that became so overwhelming. I think every one of us would have been just blown away by it. But one of the things we see that it's really doing as well is revealing the glory. Because again, remember, he said, I must go to Jerusalem and suffer. Now, Peter said it out loud. No, you're not. We don't want that to happen. We're going to protect you. And yet he said, no, it has to happen. They're seeing him as he is going to be as well. The bridging the gap is going to be the problem, especially because that gap is going to be horrific. It's going to be the suffering, the death, and all of this going on. But the disciples still see that. But like I said, they can't see a cross in there as well. They don't want to see what it's going to take to get to that point. Moses, when we look at who's there, it's very significant. The Exodus, the law. Elijah, tied to prophetic restoration as well. And didn't Elijah do something very significant on the mountain? What did he do? Oh, I know, you just being shy. Come on. The priest of who? Baal. Yeah. Yeah. High on a mountain, right? But one of the strongest. So that's another one. So as well as what's interesting is they are both speaking to him. Is that significant? They're not just like, here's Moses, Jesus, and then there's Elijah. They're having social interaction. What does that tell us? They have a relationship with him, right? They're not like going, oh, by the way, my name's Elijah. Oh, glad to meet you, Jesus. Yeah, I heard you were born. Good to finally get to know you. All that prophesying I did, and now it's good to see. No, they knew him already. So that tells us, there's a relationship. I know I'm stretching a little out there, but I think the fact that they're just conversing. And just imagine if you were Moses or Elijah and being able to speak to him at that moment. What a blessing for Moses and Elijah to be able to be at that progression of fulfillment of everything, right? And to be able to sit there and have that conversation with him. So I could see that, which means they're real, they're alive, and they had a relationship with him. He wasn't meeting somebody new, a man. Now, if it was Peter and Moses and Elijah showed up, it'd be different. I know I'm kind of stretching maybe, but again, the presence of all of them together are what the point is about, isn't it? And then Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. For he did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Oh, man, how many times are you just speak? Nervous talk? Don't know what to, you just, for he did not know what to say, for they were terrified. And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud. This is my beloved son. Listen to him. And suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them but Jesus only. So Peter wants to preserve the moment of glory. And I think it's, again, Peter exercising that mouth and foot thing. But it shows a powerful part of his character. That's one thing. I pick on Peter, easy target to pick on. But it shows a very strong spirit with him, a characteristic that he needs. But, wanting to preserve that moment. Would you not want to? Wouldn't you want them to be there, stay there? And so this terrified confusion that they're experiencing. 3/10, though, and it's almost like he's seeing an equality with him. Now think about it. You lived with a man. That's all you know him as a man. He's an amazing man. He can walk on water, okay, but he's a man. You see, the man is still kind of the flesh, is still a much more real persona of who this person is, Jesus, than that he's God. See? I mean, they got stories about prophets who did a lot of miracles and powerful things. And so they're just been blessed that they get to be with this Jesus. So it's that part, of no. And so that's why, when it's like, I don't know how soon, but as Peter is saying that, what happens? Surrounded with clouds. This, again, is very symbolic of the presence of the Lord. Where God is at. And God corrects it. It's like, you're seeing now, it's almost like, I wonder if they saw Jesus finally as equal with them. In other words, like I said, now think about it, they knew him as a person. They met a man. But Elijah and Moses were superheroes of history to them as a Hebrew, right? I mean, they had achieved a certain godlike level because of history. I mean, come on. Moses led them out of they grew up from wee little boys, right? Hearing about the great works of what Moses did. And then Elijah destroying all the prophets and all the things that he did. And then you got Jesus. Yeah, he can walk on water. He can raise the dead. He can, But it's almost like you don't get glorified until you're dead. Right? I mean, after people die, all of a sudden, it's amazing how all of a sudden we elevate their status somehow. They've accomplished this. And I don't know how many people in my lifetime, people that were good people, but after they died, they seemed to get better. Their reputation was far greater than what they were when they were alive. See, people tended to forget some of the other things about them, right? Jesus ain't dead yet. So when they see him, it's almost like, wow, you got to be with Elijah and Moses? They're not getting it. They're still kind of like seeing this equality. Oh, you finally reached the status, Jesus. You're with those two great men. No. And that's why it's almost like God's like, clouds, listen to him. And now it's like, the three of them sitting there go, oh. Just the emotions, a roller coaster. But it's, see how it goes all the way back to the feeding of the 4,000 and then running into the Pharisees and then getting in the boat. And then they think, oh, it's because we didn't bring bread. This is planned to this point. That's the beautiful thing about this transfiguration. Because the suffering is what really caused them to stumble when he said, and the Son of Man must go to Jerusalem and suffer and die. It's like, whoa. And it's like, one step forward, Peter, 12 back. And so what does he do? Takes him up to the mountain and transfigures. Okay, I'm going to show you. You don't seem to get it. Okay, you three, come with me. I'm going to show you. And in the middle of showing them, they still don't get it. Let's build you 3 tents. Let's just, it's like they just saw Jesus finally reach the point where he's with those 2 great men. And then God, the Father, steps in. Listen to him. Because I think they would listen to them. Because that's all they knew growing up, right? What did they listen to growing up? Moses. What did they listen to growing up? Elijah. And then what happens at the same time? They disappeared. They're gone. And who's left? Now, it doesn't say that his transfiguration, his glow and all that disappeared as well. In other words, when Elijah disappeared and Moses disappeared, we don't see that all of a sudden like he went right back to who he used to be. And I don't think he did. I think he remained in a transfigured state to bring that point home. I don't have to be transfigured and have Elijah and Moses. This is who I am. And the power of those disappearing and what they can't see anything but who? Him in his glory. And so the powerful thing is, listen, everything about this, revealing the kingdom's glory, the suffering and rejection is a part of all this, but this is who I am. And this whole spiritual world, this whole physical world is not who I am. The way, you don't get it. And hopefully, it didn't really work, but it would help get them through the suffering that he was going to go through and not break them. I mean, if those 3 would have retained that moment when they saw him, you know what they would have been saying? You boys, you arrested this guy and you don't know what you're getting into, because he is far greater than what you think. I saw who he was, and he wasn't in that body, and you should have seen how glorious he was. And God said, listen to him. So they would have had a better perspective to help them see past that suffering, because they'd already seen the glory. And they knew that's who he really was. And so no matter what they did to him in this world, it wouldn't change of who he was, the greatness of him. This as well echoes what John the Baptist said, right? About who he was, beloved son, somebody that was important. This listening to him as well echoes Deuteronomy. What did one of those that was appearing with him say about this guy he was standing there talking to in the transfigured state? 1,000 years earlier, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers. It is to him you shall listen. So it's tying all that, that idea. And that command is around that authority of Christ, him. That's what it's all kind of doing. And just seeing Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen. Oh, can you imagine how hard that would be? Especially to the other apostles. You notice he doesn't say, he says, no one. I don't know if he meant included the disciples. I don't know. Doesn't say. But even if it was, it doesn't matter. How could you, every time from this point on, you would almost want to throw that story out when they started ridiculing your Jesus, right? You don't want to bring that up. Oh, this man was with Moses and Elijah on a mountain, and I saw him transfigured, and I heard God himself say, listen to him, and look at the way you're treating him. You just love to be able to have that and bring that out. But that defeats the mission. It's going to defeat it. So it would be hard. So they kept this matter to themselves, questioning. Now look, this is important. That's why I said when I was at the beginning of the class, because I'm glad you kind of slowed me down, slowed my roll. Because today that's almost what we have, isn't it? We have people who have different interpretations. There were great men in the past who have come, but they were wrong. And they were not the ones to listen to. That's the challenge I have, when we look at commentaries and books that we use to study, and we have this great, we go to Darby and everybody talks about he's a great man, but they don't understand the impact of his teaching. And that's not who we should be listening to, right? We shouldn't be listening to the Pope. We shouldn't be listening to it's Christ, his words that we have settled in the Bible. And it's sad because I see the same thing where people are saying that they're proclaiming Jesus, but it's not the Jesus of the Bible. They change it. And we too as well need to understand the greatness of his deity and his humanity. And that's where people stumble as well. Not either he was a great man, right? Prophet, rabbi, but God? They even struggled with that. They struggled even after the apostles in the first and second, centuries, struggling with this idea. How could God, so all-powerful and pure, occupy this? Nope, couldn't be. So is as crazy as a possible complicated hologram? Or he was born and just like a super Abraham Moses or something. He was both. That's who is Jesus? He's more than just the Son of God. He's more than that. And not to mention just what he accomplished.
This is such an interesting, and I always think of the idea that in Second life, he says, you know what I saw that makes me doesn't talk about the resurrection, miracle.
That's right.
When I saw in that moment, I realized it. It's interesting that it's Moses and Elijah. You said it well to say this is the law of the prophet. The whole point of this is we don't listen to the law of the prophets. The Old Testament, New Testament. But it's neat because these three men, have so much in common. Moses fasts for 40 days on Mount Sinai. Elijah fasts for 40 days going to Mount Sinai. And Jesus fasts. These are the three men in the Bible that fasted. If you want to find Moses' body, you can't. God took it. Find Elijah's body, you can't. Heaven. Find Jesus' body, you can't. That each of these men were prophesied to come back. You mentioned Moses already. Moses said one day God's going to raise a prophet like me. And they're about to say, isn't Elijah supposed to come back? They're going to talk about that. And we know Jesus. So there's a real neat synchronicity, this fact that they have so much in common. You almost would say, yeah, we knew this moment. These were the men. And truly, these are the most important men of the Old Testament. So when God says from heaven, you don't listen to them anymore, you listen to my son. This is why Peter says, hey, everything I saw, that was.
Yeah.
It's just such a neat moment.
It's so amazing. It's so hard you could spend for a lot of time just diving in this, isn't it? All the things you mentioned, it's like I struggle with how do you teach all of this and bring it out? Because when we break classes up over a week, we got 6 days of, shut down, and then Ron starts talking again. And how do you keep the power of that? And that's why I try to grab going all the way back to the feeding and the Pharisees conflict. And it's almost like now I'm cheapening, it's like, because it's all about, this is where he's bringing them, isn't it? And there's so many beautiful things about it that is just so powerful. That we as well. That's why we just look at it. But like what Peter said in Second Peter, that's the one thing. I saw him walk on the water. I saw him raise the dead. I saw him come back to life. I saw all this. But you know what it was? Did he mention? at Transfiguration. But he still, even after that, didn't he struggle? He denied him again. He goes to Cornelius' house and says, "What do you want? Do you not know how illegal it is for a Jew to hang out with a Gentile?" Paul had to rebuke him. So, that's us. We struggle as well, don't we? It doesn't mean we're unrighteous or we're failures, but we have to have something to hold on to. And I think that's the glorification of Christ. Now, that transfigured state that they saw temporarily on that moment, that's who he is now for us as well. But we're going to have to close the class. I enjoyed it. It's hard to go through, but I appreciate your comments and everything. I hope you'll be able to make it down here at 10:45 for worship, and then this afternoon at 4 p.m. and midweek at 6, and back over here again, and we'll try to keep this going and keep that excitement about this fantastic event that is so amazing. So until then, God bless.